Yes, he is, Vaughn. He's a top member. He is the House Majority Leader. He is Representative Kevin McCarthy from the great state of California. Welcome. Good to have you here, Representative.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So we're here at this 10,000 Small Business Conference. You up there at Capitol Hill have done some pretty big things in the last couple of months. You've got a big tax law you put through, tax cuts. You've got a big budget agreement you just come to. Look at that through the prism of the small business owner. How is it going to affect his or her life?
Well, if you look at a small business or looking to start a small business, you just had the lowest rate cut in more than 40 years to start a small business. So when you look at risk, access to capital matters, though, too. So you look at a number of bills that we passed enhancing ability for more capital. I think you'll find more people willing to invest. If you go back to our Jobs Act, you can get private investors, too, different than even when it comes to banks. Putting our budget deal together, less chaos in Washington. So for the next 2 budget years, you're going to get away from these continuing resolutions. Is government shutting down or not? I think greater stability and continuity, I think you're going to think that's much better too. And look what the Atlanta Fed and others are saying. Growth is coming back in America. You know, we had some of our lowest growth years under Barack Obama. If you take his highest year, that was lower than the worst year under Bill Clinton. So, I mean, you want to start a business in those growth years, the ability to latch on and be able to make a real difference.
And Donald Trump, as candidate and now as president, has made growth a top priority for his administration, no question about it. A lot of that growth is going to come from small business as a practical matter. That's certainly where jobs come from. You see a lot of that growth coming from small business. At the same time, when you survey small business owners, they don't list taxes up toward the top of their concerns. They list regulation, they list access to qualified people and training people, and they list, as you mentioned, capital, access to capital. How much of the responsibility for nurturing small business, growing it, is in Washington? How much of it is really not in Washington?
Well, some's in Washington, some are in the states. You know, the federal government could do a lot, but if you're in California, it's a pretty tough place to start a small business today. But let's first start with regulatory, what you talked about. When we first came in, there's this law in the books called the Congressional Review Act, and only one time in history had it ever really been used successfully. And it allows you to look back at a regulatory world and repeal. Not that it came through the House, but these agencies that aren't accountable had passed something. And when an agency proposes a new regulation, they'll score it, meaning what's it cost to business, and if it reaches $100 million, it's called a major ruling. Well, in the last 5 years under Barack Obama, you had 82 major rulings on average every single year. Well, we just took the Congressional Review Act and repealed 15. So you had a better climate system. So I think that's the start. Job training, we have some of the lowest unemployment. So what we're really looking at is how do we get those people who are off work, who are sitting out there, how do we retrain them, get them back into the workforce? Because the participation rate, and I may get it off a little bit, but it was about 62.7%, really the lowest it's been since 78. Well, that's a bad number to have. We want that participation rate higher. So we got to look at that retraining, and it gives us an opportunity. And then what's going to happen is wages are going to increase because more competitiveness. So we should look and work with the states for retraining. Vocational is one. You've got a lot of people in the military coming back home. How can we speed that up? We did something where I just put a bill in. I don't know if you're familiar with Udacity. Udacity is another way of training. You know, if you don't have a job in 6 months, they give you 100% of your tuition back. Well, that's a way someone doesn't have to go to 4 years of school, but gets that training they need to go right into the workforce. The GI Bill didn't allow you to go there. Well, we changed that. And now the GI Bill isn't 15 years or lose it, it's forever. So I think we've made some real progress right now, but we've got more to do.
You mentioned cost of capital, being able to borrow money. That's critical for small business, people starting out. How concerned should we be about the deficit and the possible effects on interest rates and access to capital when we're running up a really big deficit?
Well, we always should be worried about interest rates, but remember how low interest rates have been for quite some time. I don't see them spiking right away or in any shape or form. People are fearful of inflation because we've got growth coming back. But if we really want to solve our debt, you can't solve it just by cutting. You have to grow the economy. So we've done that first part. And what really people should be fearful of is where the money's being spent today. When Ronald Reagan was president, 75% of your budget really Congress controlled. It was that discretionary spending, everything that you think government is, from the military, Department of Ag. And that mandatory Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt only made up 25%. But in today's world, that mandatory makes up 69%. It's automatic. And Congress really doesn't have control over that year to year. So we have to look at our entitlements if we want them to be there for a future generation. And we have a demographic issue. 10,000 people a day for the next 15 years are qualified. And we should look at those things to protect them for a future generation, and we can do that. And it's better to do it when you have a growth economy, and so there's going to be an opportunity here in the future to do it.
Anyone who's studied this question comes out exactly where you are. We have got to deal with entitlements. It is going to choke us.
Yes.
Sooner or later, we're spending all of our money on mandatory spending. At the same time, we just had a presidential election in 2016, and neither candidate said we need to take this on. If there was any mention of entitlements, it was just, we're going to protect it. So is there really a political will? I mean, you're an elected official. Is there a political will? Are the voters willing to say, yes, it's okay if I give something up?
Well, I'll tell you, since Republicans took control of the House, we have passed a balanced budget, and we have dealt with our entitlements every year, and we've gotten reelected where others said we would not. Because we're being very honest with the voters of where we are. We also protect what they currently have, and we're talking about future generations, protecting it for them as well. The longer you wait, the fewer options you have. The other issue is what we've been able to do as well is get the economy growing again. So if you look at the January revenues, we actually had a surplus that month. And it's different each month. I mean, you probably had 16 of the last 20, but this was a little different. So what's going to happen in this new tax bill and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, more people are working, more income's going. People, they should check their checks. They're getting a raise every month right now because of the withholdings. So there's an opportunity to deal with entitlements when you're in a growth stage than when you're in a downturn.
So finally, talk about infrastructure. We got a plan out of the administration yesterday on infrastructure. How important is that to the small business owner or the person starting out a business? And how realistic is it to expect us to actually spend a lot more money on infrastructure as badly as everyone agrees we need it? Is that realistic in this climate?
Well, I think we could spend money, but if you look at what the White House put out, public-private partnership, we need to work together. We have found in states, they have done these pilot programs that have been very successful. And what we really should look at is what America should look like in the next 50 or 100 years and lay that foundation. There's also opportunities where places and cities and counties can sell some of their infrastructure, then it goes back on the tax rolls, it's being managed more efficiently, and you get enhancement to reinvest that in new infrastructure of what you need. So I think it's looking at it in a 21st century model that would really help.
What about some revenues, like user fees, like a gas tax, which hasn't been raised now in 25 years, for example? Isn't that sort of an obvious one? Let's increase the gas tax some to put back into roads and bridges.
Well, really, when you look at that, people have taken this gas money and put it into bike trails, put it into mass transit. So you're taking money away that's being part of user, and then you have electric cars running and not paying for it. And you have cars that are going further. So you really maybe want to look at that model differently because a few people are subsidizing a lot of other things, so it's not a true user fee. So I think looking at it from a different perspective and making sure the money's going to those items that you actually thought you were paying for would go further in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. That's Representative Kevin McCarthy from California and the House Majority Leader.